something happening here. But what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop.
Hey, welcome to the Janesville Jamble. I'm Steve.
I'm Nick.
And this episode of the Janesville Jamble is brought to you by the Old 95. After you're done working at the plant, don't forget to stop down and have a tap of your favorite Miller product.
And also Nick's Dugout.
Oh, we can't forget Nick's Dugout. You can run down there in between your lunch hour, grab a quick drink and a little bite to eat, and get back before the line starts running.
Two places that were open and rocking and rolling when GM was as well in Janesville. Which is what tonight's Jamble's about, right, Steve?
That's right. We've been kind of talking about eventually having our captain, Dona Dutcher, on, and this episode of the Janesville Jamble is going to be dedicated to kind of the Legacy Center, but in our own little twist and own little take between the three of us. And you'll get to hear a little bit about what's going on with the Legacy Center and a bit what has happened in the past few years to bring it to where it is today.
And I think really more importantly, you'll hear about why this project means so much to so many people and the stories and maybe a little bit of that, at least via airwaves, that emotional attachment.
That's right. So it's a bit of a it's a great long episode. So
well, GM was here over 100 years. I think you could, understand why this is a little bit longer than normal. So
yeah, buckle
up those seatbelts in that GM vehicle.
You get your Cadillac Cimarron. No, don't buy a Cadillac Cimarron, but there are a ton of great vehicles that were made down in the plant in Janesville.
Buckle up your seatbelt of that 96 Chevy Suburban.
There we go. And enjoy this episode of the Janesville Jamble. So here you go, the interview with Dona Dutcher, the curator, director of the Legacy Center here in Janesville. All right, Nick.
Welcome to the Janesville Jamble.
We are on the air with the one and only Dona Dutcher.
Also known as Captain T.
She is
which
Captain
we'll get
T.
into that later.
That's right. Dona,
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How the heck are you?
I'm in a good mood.
It's best day ever.
It is best day ever.
Awesome.
Guys
That's
are a
what
bunch
good
of liars.
friends do.
Hey, we're breathing air. So honestly, it is a great day, right?
That's right. We're this side, we're the right side of dirt.
I saw at Quick Trip they have free air.
They do. They're one of the few stations that have free air anymore. They should charge you $0.25.
You know what that makes me think of is that scene in Spaceballs where Dick Van Patten has that can of air and he opens it up and he's just breathing it in.
I remember that. What a great movie.
Classic movie.
So, a classic movie. Captain T, Dona Dutcher to everyone else, but most famously known as the director and curator of the Legacy Center. Legacy Center tell us what the Legacy Center is all about, Dona.
What is the Legacy Center for those that might be listening for the first time? I have no idea.
Right.
All right, so the Legacy Center is being created to pay respect to the employees of the automobile industry in Janesville and the surrounding area.
Awesome.
It's been 100 years of history here.
And
generations of families and multiple family members within those generations. So it's had a large impact on our community.
I know a lot of the people listening here, when you say automobile industry, the first thing that comes to mind is GM, right? There are a lot of other industries and other sectors that actually were tied to that, but for the most part, when you think of the automotive industry in southern Wisconsin, you think of the GM plant in Janesville, right?
Right.
But
as you said, there's a big contingency with W.R. Arthur and Jatco, and there was Midland Steel and Lear Seating and multiple others.
And I know that, well, it's not necessarily true anymore because GM's been gone from Janesville for, a decade now, but
Right.
there's still many, many families that have so many ties to the automotive industry and are very excited about the Legacy Center, especially when it was announced a few years ago. And knowing that you're heading it up, I know the excitement is even higher. So we wanted to take a moment to thank you and, basically just ask a number of questions, like how in the heck did you get involved in this?
I don't even know if I can really tell you a direct answer to that. We talked about it a few years back when I was managing the Milwaukee Street branch for Blackhawk Community Credit Union. We were set to remodel, and the plant it was still on standby, but it wasn't looking good. It was just a matter of the next contract coming up, and kind of figured that they would make the official closure at that time. But in the meantime, when I was in that branch, I had so many of the former GM employees that I knew that would come in and sit down and talk to me about the situation. And it was a lot of nostalgia, and it was a mix of sadness and happiness when they talked about their time there, but the fact that it was gone. And I was thinking that our remodel should be something that honored that paid tribute to the automobile the automobile workers, and the fact that the credit union itself was born inside the walls of the plant.
That's right.
And so on a smaller scale, I was thinking storyboards and an industrial look, like it would be inside of a assembly line inside the plant. And that was, for me, that was where it started for me. And it grew from there because the board was also thinking about how they pay respect to the fact that that's where we started, and we were like the last man standing in regards to those chemicals of the plant.
Mm-hmm.
And it grew from that remodel, and it became this larger project. And I think that because of my earlier conversation, and if you meet me, if you don't know me already and you meet me and you talk to me about it, it's pretty easy to understand that I have a passion for the project. And so I think that second part where my position became what it was born out of that. Just that it's hard to not know that when you talk to me about the plant and about the history and how much I think it matters that we do something to not let the history just disappear.
Yeah.
Especially the history of the people that work there.
Yeah, I know that before I knew that any of this stuff was going on, and I grew up not far from General Motors. In fact, I literally right down the hill, it seems. And, my dad, as you know, worked down there. And,
right.
I remember when I heard the news that they were closing that for good.
Man.
And there was always that hope that, they would change their mind at the last hour, right? That they would maybe retool or get another project, or then towards the end there, that at least they'd become some type of stamping plant, or something else would still go in there. So it's still related to GM because of the history that plant had, because at that time it was still the oldest operating plant in GM history, from what I understand, that was still going. And, a lot of us would think, why would you want to just not acknowledge that and honor that? But, like big business, they don't really as much care about the history. It's all about dollars and cents. But Steve, myself, and others involved in that project do. And, I remember driving by after maybe a year or two after it had closed down, and you could see how just like if you drive by Jatco today, you look at where the parking lot used to be, and you can remember in the 80s where it was just full of cars. Now you look at it, and it just looks like a weed.
It's a jungle.
It's a jungle, exactly. And,
Oh,
you know,
wait,
honestly, when I drive down Delavan Drive, there was a small part of me that, and I had history. Like I said, my dad, I had my aunt worked down there. I worked down there a couple summers. And, you know, the memories, and we'll get to that when we talk about specifics with some of the things that you've done, but you know, part of me didn't want anything to be done with that. Like, I knew that there wasn't going to be another plan in there. They weren't going to do, but I didn't want it to get demolished. I just wanted it to just stay as like a shrine to what it was, and I didn't care if it got all weedy and grown over. There was a small part of me, but clearly that's not anything that was going to be beneficial, and you know, so now you kind of understand why it gets disassembled, but. The memories are there, and the emotions are certainly there and still high.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And even though it was, you knew it wasn't going to happen, you're right. Just seeing the building still standing, still, you know, there was a glimmer, a possibility, because it was still a full structure.
Right.
Once the demo started, yeah.
Well, it's one of those things that, you know, you'd always say that would never close. You know, like it's one of those things like that could never happen. You know, that was one of those things like you could never see that happening. Like, you know, I'm sure that was said back in the day as well because Janesville was originally a big railroad town. It'd be like the idea of railroad tracks just being ripped out of Janesville. Like, who would have ever thought that happened? Yeah. You know, so to see that just come and go just kind of reminds you that nothing necessarily lasts forever. But one thing that maybe will are the bricks that we distribute out to people,
the bricks and the memories,
and the jewelry that you're making. And how did that get going? So the brick distribution.
It was a conversation I had that I thought it would be because they've done it, you know, at other demolition sites, Tiger Stadium, I mean, all across the United States. There have been brick distributions, and I was just kind of thinking, you know, what's something tangible that people could hold on to, but it's not like a body from a Suburban, you know, something that you can put in your house, something that you could look at or just still feel connected. And when I first talked to CDC, their plan was to dump a truckload out towards Delavan Drive and just let people take what they want. And I said, you know, we appreciate that, but I think you're going to get 4 or 5 people with large trucks and some equipment who are just going to load them up and take them, and there isn't a chance for them to be distributed to within the community.
Yeah, I remember that, Donna, because they, in the newspaper, they did mention that, because that was a big thing, that if this ever does get demolished, that building, the bricks were a big deal, and they made a statement in the paper basically stating that they were going to give the bricks back to the community. So I remember that.
But their distribution plan was, left a lot to be desired. But I can tell you that in my conversations, because I spent a lot of time with that crew, the CDC crew in Janesville, and they admittedly understood how they had misjudged the community because of other communities that they worked in. They said they had never experienced in all of the demos they did, and I remember them saying, including Tiger Stadium, they had never had this emotional attachment from people that they experienced here. Because people would just drive past the stop sign, you know, basically just bull rush the security and drive on to the lot. And they would say, hey, you can't be here. And over, they'd say, they were told, I worked here 40 years, I worked here 45 years, I worked here 30 years. And there was just this emotional attachment that they were surprised. They just hadn't experienced it at this level. They said this was unique, and they had a better understanding of why the brick distribution meant so much more, and that they couldn't just dump a truckload out near Delavan Drive because there was this extreme emotional attachment that they hadn't experienced at that level before.
Yeah, they were probably used to people wanting to come into the site to take scrap or, get what they can get their hands on to sell to make money off of. But it seems like the people that would come in were, like you said, had that emotional attachment that they wanted one more look, or they didn't really want anything. They just wanted that look. They wanted to maybe have that memory or that kind of, saying their goodbye, almost like a funeral, like saying goodbye and having that moment.
Exactly.
This is the last time.
And that was just part of the processional for them.
Right.
They didn't want to take the flowers. They just wanted to go through the processional.
Almost to pay their respects.
Be allowed to do it.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
No, there was a lot of work that was done with the few distributions that took place. Gosh, that was over a year ago now. But one thing that the community really doesn't know is that, CDC, I mean, honestly, that was their plan, right? I mean, it was to drop a couple of loads and then just move on. And they were, especially the superintendent or the foreman down there, the guy that oversaw that, Matt, he really did a good job in working with you to really understand what it was about. And he was pretty awesome, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I can't say enough about him and the crew, but if he hadn't bought into it, we would have never been able to do what we did. And he not only bought into the idea, I mean, he went above and beyond. And you guys know that because you witnessed it as well. I mean, when we had all those pallets, we needed a forklift to put them up. And they had a job to do. And they loaded it. They loaded the semi for us. That was definitely not something that they had any kind of obligation to do, but they did it. And I mean, over and over. When we were there in that lovely storm, when Steve, your dad, was there with the dump truck, and
I'll never ever forget that day.
That was insane. And the lightning is bolting through the sky, and Matt's in that big metal piece of equipment, and mentions that he's been hit by lightning a few times.
I remember that
already.
Yes.
Yeah, but he kept going, and he loaded the truck, and I mean, I don't think people have an idea of what they allowed us to do that they did not have to. And I think that the fact that we came in and showed respect and understanding to what they were doing. I mean, I was their PR person sometimes, because when somebody would go crashing through the gate, obviously they would have to go after them because it's a safety issue.
Right.
And a lot of times then I would intercept and say, I understand how you feel. I get that this is very emotional for you, and I understand the depth of that. And they aren't trying to be disrespectful of that, but they are a demolition crew. And so it's dangerous to be here. When you go flying through that parking lot, they've got these huge pieces of equipment, and they're not looking for you because you're not supposed to be here.
Right.
And it makes a difference for them in their life and their career, what kind of safety record they have.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to be responsible for this accidental death of someone who just drove in and nobody was paying attention, and then some big piece of equipment comes through and knocks something or swings, and there you are. And it was, I can tell you that it never happened that anybody left angry after we had that conversation.
Yeah.
They understood. But also CDC understood more as time went on as to why these people, they weren't just being oppositional defiant. They were in pain. And this was part of their healing process or their grieving process. And once they understood that a little more and the unusual environment that they were working in, then they handled it differently as people came in to the best of their ability while still maintaining a safe environment.
Sure, and a lot of those people that with that emotional tie eventually did get a brick. We talked about CDC and all the things that they did, but you had a crew, especially with that second distribution. They did.
Yeah.
The first one was in May at the credit union, and the second one was out to the Moose property, and that second one included the smokestack bricks. And I mean, you had a crew the first time, but the second time it was a special group of people that I remember. For me, I'll never forget. It was June 1st, 2019, and CDC let the crew come down onto the former GM property, and away we went. I mean, there were some great characters down there that day.
Well, and I think it should be noted that that wasn't my request. I was not going to ask them to allow us to stage on the property because I knew, that it was important to them that they, contained that area with the people that were employed there, and that was part of the safety procedures and processes in place.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's what was so incredible is by that time, that was Matt saying to me, you don't have to haul those bricks off. I can have them dump them in that front parking lot. You guys can stage right there. I mean, that's how that relationship evolved. And that says a lot about them understanding the environment.
Yeah.
How different it was, and that they accommodated that. And that was incredible because a lot of the people that we had that were there working with us, all of those volunteers, 90% of them, maybe 100%. I mean, they didn't necessarily work at the plant, but they were all connected in some way.
There was definitely a connection.
Yeah, and it was a very, there were emotional times. We were there as the front of the building was final parts were being knocked down, and that was crazy.
It was. It was. And, I got to meet a lot of great people through that process. Daniel Mesra. Dan is, I guess, best known in the area. He's the page owner of the GM page.
Janesville End of an Era
page on
GM,
Facebook.
GM
End of an Era.
Which is a great page. If you haven't checked that out, please do so. And like that, he's
an
a
incredible
great guy.
volunteer. He's done so much, and he's worked so hard for this whole Legacy Center project as well.
Yeah, and there were a lot of other people.
He's a great supporter.
A lot of other people down there, and there's this one guy that I knew his dad, and his dad and my dad played softball together. They worked on the plant together. I actually met him on a pile of smokestack bricks. Officially met him.
Yeah, and you guys, for years, you crossed paths and did not connect prior to that. I mean, you found out there were so many times you could have possibly been in the same places or you had these same people in your lives.
Oh, it's incredible.
And it was a smokestack.
Well, the Jamble was created because of
That's right.
basically
by the way,
certain bricks that day.
person was a guy sitting next to me here. So.
Yeah, that ugly mug over here, Steve, next to me.
Yeah.
And I remember, hearing about that project, and I wanted to. I felt like I needed to be a part of it, and somehow just for my own closure, really. And I know we've talked before, Donna, about that.
Yep.
And the first, the first thing I said was, I know I have some shirts of my dad. He passed away in 2011, and I think he thought it'd be neat to get donated to the Legacy Center. And but we talked for a long time, and then we met to. I gave you those shirts, and then I mentioned about wanting to help out any way I could, and the first thing was sorting bricks, and I got down there the first day. I didn't know what to do, and was just kind of like, all right, there's like 4 huge piles of bricks, and it's
5,000 bricks.
Yeah, and like Daniel, you mentioned, was down there, and it's like, all right, I guess I'll just go over here and start. What do I need to do? And this ugly mug over here sitting to the left of me was just sorting smokestack bricks, and it was like, all right, and
so get working, kid.
Just get working. It's just, what do you need me to do, kind of thing. And
I just make sure everyone understands when you're talking about the ugly mug next to you, I am not sitting next.
Yeah, Nick.
Well, you are the queen, i.e., Captain T.
You are.
Which, oftentimes, we reference to each other Musketeers. How did that come out?
Yeah, how did that come out?
Captain T is one of the characters in the Musketeers. Captain Treville, I believe,
Yes.
was.
Oh, I think it was. I might be wrong, but I'm thinking it was one of those days when I was being grumpy.
That never happens.
Not to the world, but because I was comfortable with you guys, I was venting about this all for one, and
there we go. I remember that now.
ES line for a moment because
Yes.
I was about something, and I don't know if that's when it started or if that part came up because we had already been discussing it. But that's one of the references that I remember is I was like mad about Jimmy Stewart and It's a Wonderful Life for teaching me to think that there's good people in the world. Like I was just having one of those moments.
You know, the funny thing though is
I do believe in It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh yeah, the funny thing is that we're talking about that story with Musketeers, and that was all through working with getting bricks for not only the distribution but finding artifacts and stuff for the Legacy Center, future Legacy Center. But we're creating our own stories in that process, just like other workers down at the plant for over 100 years while they were there had their stories, what we just kind of were talking about.
Right.
So it's almost like it was it's almost like that property, I mean, dare I go out and say it, is almost like Field of Dreams in a sense with that magic that if you know that movie. Now granted that movie is fiction, but you still have people that come from all over the country, maybe out of the country even, to see this field where they filmed it. You know, and maybe in a sense General Motors, that property is a local Field of Dreams or Field of Memories at least.
Yeah, right. It definitely created a lot of dreams. It made dreams come true for a lot of families.
Correct. Well,
you guys both went to college. And
we did.
You were able to do that because of your father's employment there.
I'd say I wouldn't, Donna. I'll go out. I wouldn't be here physically if it wasn't for GM because.
Right,
and same with, I mean, not Nick. I mean, we both had, surgery when we were young. And
I was born premature. I was 3 pounds in 1978. Right. That wasn't really healthy and good back then. They didn't have the technology that they did, but being able to have that kind of income to be able to support,
right, that kind of insurance coverage. That, you're right.
Yeah, I had a hole in my heart. I had heart surgery when I was 4, back in the early 70s, mid 70s. And if it wasn't for the benefits that General Motors offered here in Janesville, I don't want to know what the outcome would have been.
What's absolutely crazy when you guys say that is I think about the fact of where I'm at today and where what I feel so passionate about and what I have dove in, my whole self into this project. And my father was an independent contractor. He owned his own concrete and flat work, and they also had a company called C&H Grading and then Pat Howe Incorporated. And so I grew up not around people, or I didn't know that they worked at the plant. Because a lot of my dad's friends, I found out later in life, had worked at the plant, and then, like, our plumber, that was he was a trades guy, so he worked at the plant, and then he did plumbing as a second job, and same with our electrician. So Harry Studebaker and Mr. Getchell, they both worked at the plant, and then they did their trade additionally. Those were my dad's friends. I didn't know about their main job. I didn't know that. And I moved right after graduation out to California. And I spent a few years out there. And it was there that I ended up falling in love over the phone with my husband now, that it'll be 29 years next month, that I had known him since high school. And I remember I came back here after we decided that I was going to move back because he said he couldn't leave his job because it's just a good job. And I remember one of my friends saying, "Oh, well, he works at the plant." And I thought, what plant? I can honestly tell you I do not have any recall of a reference to the General Motors plant. And I grew up here. I grew up in Milton, but it was just a different crowd that my family ran with. They were all business owners.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing to me that this plant stood there and how attached I have become to, or how important it is to me to tell the story of the people that work there and what it has, how it's become embedded in me that I didn't even know of its existence for the first 20 years of my life. And I lived here. And I think that's crazy.
Yet today you're actively involved in keeping those memories alive for a lot of those folks who, it was their life. It was their home in some cases. It was their second home. And that's where they met their spouses. That's where it was a city within a city. And you're working on trying to make sure that those memories and the memorabilia stays relevant.
And when we talk about the plant closing, and I always think that that's the part that's most frustrating. We know that plants close all over the country at different times, and the world changes, and it never stays the same, right? But I remember about maybe 6 years prior to the closing, I was out at the UAW hall. I was at a dance. I think it was a Valentine's dance, and we were all sitting at the table, and I had just watched the Michael Moore documentary, Roger and Me.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember him at a UAW hall interviewing people in Detroit at some point, and their plant had closed or was closing, and he was talking to them about it. And I remember having this moment, sitting there thinking, that could be us someday. And then brushing it aside, thinking, it's not going to happen here.
Yes.
And when it did, I think the part I know that was the most frustrating for me is that what GM, they're looking at their balance sheet. They're looking at, what's the most valuable thing here that they need to do, and they're just looking at it from the business perspective, and not necessarily maybe what we would see or that they could completely understand about the workforce here, and that you couldn't put a price on it. You couldn't understand unless you were part of it somehow, the value that they had in the employees that worked there, the level of dedication, the work ethic. It's just, you can't put that on a graph and understand it that way. And that is something that I feel like they lost and that they will never be able to get back, because it was so unique, because it was a small town in the sense of where most plants are located, and you have, these larger metropolitan areas, and you have this workforce that comes from all over the place. This was still, it was a small community, even when it was 8,000 employees.
Yeah,
and
you're right.
That is rare, and that is not something you can put on an Excel spreadsheet and understand it. And that's the part that I think they didn't factor in that was priceless.
Yeah, you take a look at on the positive side, though, a glass half full look at this is that those workers who, when the plant closed, they moved to other communities to continue working for GM. Hopefully, they instilled some of that GM Janesville work ethic at those facilities, and then those that stayed back here in Janesville and found another trade or another skill, same thing. Hopefully, they took what they learned down there and put some of that to work in their new careers. So, you got to look at it that way.
And I agree with you. I just, they took something very special with them, no doubt.
They did.
I heard something earlier today. I was having a conversation with somebody who had worked at the Janesville plant, and they were second generation. They did not have enough time in when the plant closed, and so they ended up transferring. So they would have transferred 10 years ago. And they told me that it's frustrating because they know it can be better. Basically, that they know what it can be like, and this is the part I found this was extremely interesting. The fact that when this person dreams about work, even 10 years after the fact, they dream in the Janesville plant.
And that's why the Legacy Center is so important, is to keep the memories.
Yeah.
And not only, go ahead, sorry.
No, I'm just saying that I find that extraordinary. And I think that is, when I hear things like that, not that I had a doubt, and I'm not going to say I don't get frustrated sometimes just based on the whole situation sometimes of trying to create something that hasn't been there before. But those kind of stories just reiterate why it's important, why it matters.
So
does it matter?
We've been talking a lot about the memories and a little bit about kind of what we have done. Nick and I have helped out and really got to know you a ton, Donna. But what's going on? What's that?
You've more than helped. You guys, I can say without any reservation that this project continues because I was able to count on the two of you.
There are a lot of other people there too. So, but thank you.
Oh, most definitely. But for that, for the soul, sometimes it's gotta be fed, and obviously, in any job that you have, things can get frustrating, and you guys are just good friends and great people who have helped me keep my head above water.
Well, and we're just taking direction.
That's right.
And it wouldn't be without you. So,
let me admit, I like telling people what to do, and you guys listen. So that's what's cool about it.
Yeah. Well, you are the captain after all.
That's right. What do you need us to do? Okay, we're there.
Exactly. Who do we need to kill this week?
Yeah.
Who do I need to kill this week or threaten? Okay, sounds good.
You guys have been above and beyond so many times. It's crazy, and I so appreciate it.
Well,
and I mean,
if it wasn't,
talk about things go ahead.
If it wasn't for you, I would have never met Santa Claus.
Me neither.
Right.
Which you're still upset about.
You never showed up.
I think we need to tell that.
We need to tell this story. So I know we're going to get to the Legacy Center, what's happening now. But
I can honestly say, crash a little kid's Christmas photo album shoot. Done. Cross that off the bucket.
That's right. There, the bucket list that is taken care of. So we were down. Gosh, it was just before Christmas. We were down. I remember we were down at the plant. It was a Sunday. It was a Sunday or Saturday. I can't remember anymore. But filled the Volt full of stuff to take to the moose. So I have a Chevy Volt. That sucker was laying on the ground.
You had a low rider.
Sparks coming off the roadway.
And
you had your Volt pimped out.
I
did. Just another day in Janesville.
That's
nothing
right.
to see here.
Nope, just another day. So we're heading towards the Moose property. Kept a couple things over there back at that time, and instead of going, so I went into Lustig Park from Delavan Drive and kept going all the way through. And Nick followed me.
Yeah, Donna fishtailed and took off like a bat out of hell down Center Avenue like the race. I know where she was going.
Well, anyways, it was just like out of a. I swear this was just.
I'm like, where the hell is he going? Why are we going through the park? That just makes no sense. Why don't we just go up like the way you went?
Yeah, but no, I had to go through the park and
it was like a tractor beam. Hauling you in that way.
Next thing you know, I'm looking out of the corner of my eye, and I'm like, the hell? Santa Claus is over there. I'm like, well, you know what we're going to have to do? We have to stop. So I pulled in.
So he pulls in, and you can see there's like this guy dressed in a Santa Claus suit, and they have all the leaves in the background that have fallen. And there's like a mom and like, I don't know, 3 or 4 year old girl.
Maybe 3 or 4 year old.
And he pulls in there, and I'm like, what the hell are we doing? And, you know, my first thought is, God, these people probably think we're going to kill him. You know?
Right.
Because you're like, who the hell are these people, like, pulling in? And then he gets out, you know, like, oh, I'm running for governor kind of mentality.
I just
like,
go, hey, you mind if we take a picture with Santa?
And he's like, and then tell him.
But then does he have the brick in his hand?
Not yet.
At that point?
Not yet.
Go back for it.
So
Okay.
Santa Claus, I'm pretty sure, is patting himself down for weapons because he's thinking he's going to have to defend himself. Because who are these two people that are coming up here? I'm in trouble. But then Steve, like usual, shifts into like congressman mode and is just like, hey, you know, we're and he tells him what we're doing, and we're hauling stuff for the Legacy Center, and then you could see Santa Claus kind of calming down a little bit.
And a sparkle in his eye all of a sudden came in.
Yeah, and the elf is like putting down the weapons and stuff, and then, hey, do you want a brick? Because we had a car full of them, and so, and then actually, Mom, whose daughter was trying to get a brick. Was that right?
Yeah, that's right. She wasn't able to get it, so we're like, oh, I got a ton of them in the back of the car.
There you go. And like, hey, do you mind if we get a picture with you?
Yeah, and so we ended up getting a picture with Santa Claus.
Right, and then when we told you about it, you were ticked, weren't you?
Well, we're texting you too.
You
like,
thought
where are you?
Oh, because I'm sitting out at the Moose Club, like, where the hell are you guys? I mean, I admit that I was racing someone because I had the Cadillac that day, and I kind of like the get up and go of that car. And when one of those other cars thinks they're gonna cut in front of me, I let them know, right?
If you ain't rubbing, you ain't racing.
So I'm
Okay, Ricky.
a Dale Earnhardt Sr. fan. You know that's gonna happen. And so I'm sitting out at the Moose Club thinking, what happened? Where did they go?
But then,
and then when we came back that way.
We went back that way.
And it wasn't that long.
It was maybe 15 minutes at the most. And it was even the leaves were the
leaves.
The bench
it's almost
gone.
like they brought leaves in for the shoot, and it was gone. Like everything was gone. The bench was gone. The leaves were gone.
It was just like it never happened.
Right.
Santa Claus was there.
Yeah. This never
Legacy
happened.
Claus.
Yes, Legacy Claus. All right, so that's kind of our. We have a ton of stories. We could go on story legacy, but you know, we're talking about. So I saw on Facebook. I saw on Daniel's page. The end of an era. I saw some jewelry on the page. What's going on? What's kind of the vision? What's next for the Legacy Center?
So from the beginning of this project, I readily and happily admit that I am a creative thinker, and that it's really hard to turn it off. I don't think it ever happens. I'm always my mind is going with 7,000 thoughts a minute, and so when I'm on the site of the demolition, I'm seeing things that I'm visioning that can be something else, that can be something that can also be tangible for people that beyond the brick, right? So I'm picking up this scrap metal, and I took a lot of crap for it. Like, why are you grabbing that stuff?
You were like Egon from Ghostbusters, you know, like somebody blows their nose and you want to keep it and hang on to it.
Yep.
But now you understand.
Right?
Now everybody understands why, because to anybody it just looks like a washer. But then look what you did with it. That's amazing what you did with it.
Well, and I remember the site manager, Matt, his standard line for me after a while was, "You're killing me, Donna." Because I would ask, "Can I have that?" And he'd say, "What do you want that for?" And I'm like, "Well, here's what I see." He'd just say, "You're killing me, Donna. You're killing me, Donna." And so I would just say it for him before I even asked the question, because I knew it was coming. But those, so the necklaces that I made are just pieces of scrap. They're rusty washers. So they made these huge piles for the trucks to come in, use the magnet, grab it and drop it in and haul it off to recycle. But when they do that, a lot of the little pieces would just fall through and fall to the ground. Or even when they stack them, those little pieces kind of roll down and go around the edge. So as long as which the great thing was is that Matt would allow me, I pretty much had the run of the place as long as I followed the rules. And so I did, because I wanted to show them that I respected what they were doing. I wasn't going to put them in jeopardy. And the prize for that was being able to just have access pretty much all the time. It got to the point where I just would drive up to the gate. I'd text Matt and say I'm here, and if their workflow hadn't changed, and when it did, he'd give me a different route, but he'd say, you know where to go, and I would just drive in through the way that he had told me the last time to a spot, and then I would be able to explore. And I've got a lot of things that other people might think are crap, but they have a purpose, and they will become these things that I have envisioned for them. And one of those things that you've seen most recently would be those washers that people are saying those are beautiful, those are incredible,
and they
wow. And they don't even some people are still saying, so what is that? What is that made of? And they say, well, it was a rusty washer. For the most part, I try to leave the back in its original state and then seal it, just because then the rust isn't rubbing off on anybody on their clothing while they're wearing them. But then the front, I do some sort of art medium that's different, whether it's alcohol inks or acrylic paints or some sort of artistic design on the front, and then seal the back, and it is a piece.
Yeah, and that's just genius, because that was stuff that was just literally going to go to a landfill, and
Exactly.
we retain that. You retain that, and now people who have that memory or have that emotion can purchase that, and that money doesn't go to you. It goes towards the Legacy Center. It goes towards funding that to keep those memories going, to have those exhibits, and it's just one more thing to try to keep things going.
And you think about the people that broke in there and they stole things,
which we recovered, right?
Yeah.
Some of it we recovered, but even before that, even before the demolition started, the things that people went in and got, and I think for me it's interesting that you may have taken something and you feel like you've gained something, but it's still with the idea that you went in there and you didn't have permission and you took something. Where everything that we have, everything that we were able to get for the Legacy Center, we were allowed to do that. And it was our relationship with that crew that enabled that. And I have to say, after this last summer, I miss those guys. That was a great experience.
Yeah.
I spent so much time there, and it became just part of my day and part of my life. And I got, the site manager, he was from Kentucky, and every few weeks his wife would come up, and I got to know Stacy, and we'd go out to lunch or just explore the area a little bit. And they became another family for me, just like the whole concept of what the plant became for so many other people. And it's kind of what you were talking about before, Nick. We have created our own history with the things that we did in the last couple of years as the Three Musketeers and the other people that were involved with what we did. there was a lot of laughter, there were tears, there were stories, there was just a lot of moments, and all part of that connecting, the same as if you were part of the assembly line.
Yeah. So I know there's been a lot of transition here over the past few months with the Legacy Center, and with COVID hitting, we've taken a bit of a pause. Everybody thinks that the Legacy Center is on pause, but in reality, you are still going gung ho on getting this together. You've got a lot of things in the hopper. You got other things going. What's your day like, and what's kind of your vision?
So there's still, surprisingly, with the news that sometimes is out there, and people think that the Legacy Center has, again, like you said, on hold or pause. I still get calls for people who want to bring me memorabilia, whether it is a employee themselves or the widow of a former employee. I just had an experience last week, and it's another one of those that makes you, even though you already know it, it just enforces the whole idea that you're doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Her husband had worked there for 30 plus years, and she was moving to be closer to her daughter because she just was getting up there in age, and they felt better that if she was closer, they just felt, the grandkids and the daughter felt better that mom was closer. And so she was getting ready to sell the house, and I ended up, she called me and asked if I'd be interested in some of the things that he had. And I said, of course, if I'm building these stories about the people, then it's those little things that matter. And she said, well, do you want his lunch pail and his thermos? She said he took it every day. It's the same, he had it forever. And I said, of course. I think that's what's cool about it, is that just to think that maybe 50 years from now, there sits Norman's lunch pail and his thermos. And inside it, she told me that he always had Tums and spearmint gum. And I said, well, I'm going to get some spearmint gum then to put in the lunch pail. And
that's awesome.
From the time I spoke with her to the time I went to go pick it up, she had gotten spearmint gum and put it in the lunch pail. And I know that might sound crazy to some people, not to you guys, I get it, but that warmed my heart. That was Norman. He had his Tums and his spearmint gum inside that lunch pail, and that was part of who he was for all the years he was down there at the plant. And now it's part of the Legacy Center.
Yeah, and it just shows they can take the buildings away, but you can't take those memories away. And
exactly.
That's why this is. That's why this
down,
project.
you can take the smokestack off the horizon, but the Legacy is done.
Absolutely, and that's why this project's so important.
And why it will continue. Where it will be a story for another day. But when that is announced, there will be plenty of memories, whether they be audible memories from former workers or artifacts like you talked about, Norman's lunchbox, to a lot of different things. And I imagine there'd be a couple of bricks there too.
Probably a couple.
Yeah.
If you guys are going to give up any of the ones that you have.
Hey,
maybe,
two per vehicle, Donna. Two per vehicle. That's all I'm saying.
Maybe your wife will drop them off when you guys aren't at home.
See, they don't get it.
No, they don't get it.
They don't get it.
Okay, so I'm going to go back a couple of, a little bit here. So I remember the first time I talked to Nick, and I did not know his occupation at the time. And I was pulling out of someplace. I was in my vehicle driving, and I said, we started to talk, and I said, you know what, let me pull over because I don't want to be talking while I'm driving. I don't want to be talking on my cell phone because it's against the law. Well, then I found out, that was a good thing because
you're following the rules. Good job.
Yeah, Yeah, and he sort of is a stickler for those things. So that was a good start to our relationship.
I don't know about that.
But also, we talked a lot that first time, and there was no doubt about what this meant to him. And it was not that I didn't get that from other people, but it was definitely something that it was really important to him. And I knew it, I felt it, and there was the other connection for him with the previous location we were going to be in. And it just felt like, this is supposed to all come together like this. And even without that other building, it doesn't matter because there's still this very strong connection. And the other part of it for me, and why my relationship and our friendship with the two of you, for me, is because when this all started, I was coming off the beginning of a grieving process for the unimaginable. And I had been working on the first brick distribution, and put a lot of planning and timing into this, and I had to step away.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I can recall, and I still recall it with this fondness for what happened, and the fact that I was told when I said, I'll try to do what I can, and I was told that Steve and his dad, Ross, said, we'll take care of this. We'll do whatever we need to do for Donna. And when you are going through the unimaginable, those are precious things that you never forget, that mean a lot. And, those are the things that bond you, because it was a major undertaking, and I just couldn't finish at that moment, and you guys just picked it up and didn't even question it. Just said, we got to do this. And that was awesome. So
yeah. That was crazy. That was fun. And again, reason why I got involved is because whatever you needed, Donna, that's why I got involved. So,
and that was,
and ditto for me too. I mean, I obviously you knew my connection, and we talked for all the time, and it meant so much, and it's so much work for, as you know, one person to handle, and you really need a team of people. And we mentioned earlier Daniel, and we mentioned Steve's dad Ross, and
so many
a lot
people
of the
down there,
former workers that came to help out, and
you think about community partners. Wow, being the Sillas.
Yes.
The guys from J.P. Cullen, like Ken King, who went above and beyond. But his dad worked there forever, and he was connected, plus J.P. Cullen, as an employee there, he spent a lot of time in that plant as well. But he had a very strong family connection as well. I think his brother worked there, too, and he transferred somewhere. But I can't even begin to, the list is long, and we would be here for 5 hours trying to go through it. But, you've got Bob McGuire, who Ross' dad works for, and, allowing for the use of the vehicle, the quad axle, being able to move things when we did try to stuff our cars to the brim,
If it wasn't for Bob, we wouldn't have had that story about the lightning strikes and the heaviest rain I have ever seen in my entire life. I was sitting in the quad axle with my dad. Good Lord, I've never seen it rain so hard. It was almost like the gods were angry or were taking them away. But yeah,
it just turned black, and it was just so dark, and and it was the wind came up, and that was nuts. And then the lightning was like Zeus was, striking out at us, and there's just, you think about CDC and what they contributed and their crew. You had Todd Kimball, who has gone out of his way so many times because it matters to him as well.
Right.
Unfortunately, he's passed away, but Ron Becker was a great partner for us as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
When we did the distribution, when we went and talked with the Janesville Police Department. They were great partners. That was a great experience. The Rock County Sheriff's Department that day.
Yeah, they were awesome.
We did everything by pre-planning with them for that second distribution, and they appreciated it so much. And things, we all said it went smooth like butter that day. It was crazy.
Like butter. We
opened the gates, and wow, so many cars right away, and people thought they were going to have to wait in line again, and we had it. We had a system that it just worked. It worked, and that was from those partnerships that made it work. We made it like a very efficient assembly line.
Yeah.
And it was a beautiful thing.
And they came back and got another one. I mean, you wouldn't have had that option the first time around.
Right, They kept going and going and going, and that was fine.
Yep.
So,
no, it was so smooth. It felt good that day because we had such a great team, all working together. Those lines moved. Everybody was doing their part, and there was a lot. And, it was a beautiful thing because I was kind of roaming around to just troubleshoot or help out wherever needed. And I remember there were so many moments where, there's you two dancing. That was fun.
Caught that on
the
video.
Other end. Right, and that's on video. But there also were all these times that you could see the people that were volunteering, the former employees, the retirees. And as cars would come through, there were so many times that people were seeing people they hadn't seen for a while. And there was all these mini reunions. It was awesome. It really was. It was a great day.
That burn like the paint department in July.
Like the Tire Bay?
Oh, don't go there because that's some major PTSD in Tire Bay. Oh my gosh. Stories. Stories.
I remember we were wandering down just in that general area, out in the safe zone, of course, and you got a little shake there.
I got very shaky near the Tire Bay because when I worked down there my first summer, that was one of the first jobs I did is I slung tires in Tire Bay. I
think I remember you saying it smelled really good.
Yeah. Going to Farm and Fleet into the tire area or any tire store, multiply that by 30, that odor,
right,
and add in like 100-degree weather. I got dizzy. It was very challenging, but I liked the job itself, but it was just dealing with those odors were tough. Then I put wheel weights on. That was a pretty senior job.
But then you got to have lunch with your dad.
I did. Yeah, that was probably, when I drive by Delavan Drive, even now to this day. I mean, as a kid, like I said, we go to church up at St. Peter's, which is on Center. So we'd go by Delavan Drive up to Center, hang a left, go up by Jim's Pizza, and you'd always kind of look over. And my dad worked in the powerhouse, the power plant area of the plant. And one summer, he would always, the first summer I was down there, I was all over the plant. I was, frame line one day, I was hard trim one day, and, he'd come find me and just kind of see where I was working. And he wouldn't get in the way. He would just kind of, okay, all right, that's where he's at. All right. And then, my second summer that I worked down there, I think a guy was hurt in hard trim. So all I did was put crossbody harness wires in a hard trim. So I did that whole job. They were going to keep me there all summer. And, I loved it, because you got up to your speed and you're doing it just like everybody else. And the cool thing was where the hard trim was, it was easy to hop on one of those old plant bikes, those industrial bikes, which you have for the Legacy Center. And, you hop out. It was kind of at that north or south, I don't know where it was kind of that far back area of the plant. And you would hop out, and I would, be lunchtime. You only had so much time, and I would haul, along the railroad tracks, and I would go up to where, if you know where Delavan Drive, the train tracks come across there. If you kind of looked up that direction, that's where, back in the day, the coal trucks would come up in there, and it used to be brought in by train, the coal, and then eventually it was trucks that would bring it up. but that was kind of one of the entrances for the powerhouse up there, and I would go in there, and it was one of really two places in the plant that were air conditioned. Was in the powerhouse
yeah.
and some of the offices up there, and then of course in the admin area, and we had lunch in his office. You just talk about your day and how things are going, and then
Right.
bike back. And I was going to get to that. What was your most impactful, surreal story of doing all of this? And I think for me, it was that day that we were down there, and we were pretty much standing on the foundation of where the powerhouse
Right.
was.
Just before Christmas last year.
It was just before Christmas, and it was probably around like 4:00 or so in the afternoon. The sun was kind of getting lower, and as a kid, whenever I would hear, and I know I've told you this, Donna and Steve, whenever time I would hear a train, a 7-year-old, 8-year-old kid, I would think, because again we lived not too far away from the plant, I would think about, I wonder if that's a coal car going up to the, and he was maybe working, so he wasn't at home. And so every time to this day I hear a train whistle, I think of GM, and I think of that. And it doesn't matter where I'm at in Janesville, I think of that. And we were standing pretty much on the footprint of smokestack bricks. And, I know we'd found one of the original powerhouse bricks that was probably built, one of the first things built down there.
Right, so that was there before the plant.
Right, Samson tractor time. And, we were, for a minute there, I was just kind of, you guys were off kind of looking for stuff, and I stopped, and it was just, I was just kind of, in the moment, and it was in a train of thought, and just, it was so surreal to me, because again, he passed away in 2011, and, it was just one of those things that I remember thinking to myself, we've had those moments where I was kind of having a moment there where I just kind of was having a conversation with him, and I was just like, Dad, give me a sign that maybe you're here right now. And right then, when I thought that, guess what happened?
Wisconsin Southern came by.
Wisconsin Southern train started coming right through, and of course the train whistle. And call it coincidence, call it what you want, but to me, that was a memory, and I think for me that was probably my most surreal. What about you, Donna? What was your most impactful, surreal story, memory of this whole process? Do you have one of those?
I don't know if I have one that I can say is like the one that you had, except that that your moment wasn't lost on us. I mean, we knew by looking at you, knowing, and those are the, when you know that, and knowing that you, being able to go back into that site and let you kind of process that part of your life in another phase. I mean, obviously, that is a lifelong process when you lose your father. But I do remember you standing there, and I know that Steve and I spoke of it at some point, knowing that you were, how you were being impacted by where you were standing and the whole moment itself. Those are the kind of things that, why I say I can't say there's one moment, but there's those kind of things that are just, those are special, because if you've lost in your life, if you've had great loss, you understand how much those things mean.
Mm-hmm.
And,
absolutely.
And that's what this is about. I remember being at the hall talking with the retirees, and I said to them, I always heard that line that if you do what you love for your job, you never work a day in your life. And I always thought it was kind of BS. I just didn't think that. I always thought people just say that because they're trying to convince themselves, maybe. And I just know that when we were out there in that hot sun, all of us working together to do this thing that we knew was important to a lot of people, including ourselves, that, it was hard physical work, but it didn't feel like work at the end of the day because of what the meaning was behind it. And when I said that to the retirees, that wasn't scripted. I felt it. I felt that what I was saying was coming from my heart. And I do remember sitting out there at the hall for the retiree meeting, and in the beginning, because they have a band, and I saw some couples get up and they started to dance. And, when you think of all that history, and these are people in their 70s and their 80s, and there's a gentleman there that was 90. Just knowing the history that they have, knowing what kind of stories they know and what their contribution was to the growth of this community, that they may not even think is that big of a deal, but when you put that together collectively, it is how this community grew.
Mm-hmm.
And it is it's just important. It's that line from that film I was in.
That's right, Bill Roach.
What film are you talking about, Donna?
Yeah, there was no film.
That award-winning documentary that I was a part of?
Huh. Interesting.
I don't think he's ever seen it.
I haven't heard anything about that.
So I remember when, because I spent a lot of time with Bill Roach through the 2 years as the demolition was happening, and we set up a lot of interviews on Sundays with people, and one of the questions that he asked me was, what do you say when people say, I think you're crazy for doing all this? And I didn't even have to think about it. I just said, I think they're crazy if they don't think this is important. I said, it's not an insult to me if you think I'm crazy for doing this, because I think you're crazy if you don't get how important this is.
I agree.
Because it matters.
It does. It does matter.
Steve, what was your most surreal moment in all of this?
A lot of things. I mean, we talked about, what kind of the reasons why I got involved and why my dad got involved. Dad, if you're listening to this, I know you think I'm totally crazy for doing this, but you...
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, he does. And he really didn't care for a brick because he said, I worked on there for 37 years. I walk by him every day. Why would I want one in my house? I think it was that direct quote. But anyway, and everybody has a reason why they do or don't want them.
Yep.
But I'd have to say, honestly, the best memories for me are the relationships. Are the relationships that have been built. Getting to know people like Daniel. Getting to know Nick, aka Athos. Getting to know you better. It's surreal. There are memories for me, that I miss. Honestly, I miss seeing that building there. I really do, because even when it was closed, my son and daughter, we drive by, and there was a particular orange door that there was always a memory with their great-grandpa and my grandpa. He worked in the paint department, and he'd go out and take his story, which I'll believe. That's where he'd take his break. He'd go outside on the top floor and take a break at lunch or whatever his breaks. And he'd always point to that door. And, he passed away, almost 20 years ago now. But up until a few years ago, whenever I'd drive down Delavan Drive, I'd look at that door, and there was Grandpa. It's those memories, and it's the relationships. And I thought maybe this episode was going to be kind of more about the stuffs and the nuts and bolts about the Legacy Center, but really what this turned out, it was about relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And
which is the nuts and bolts at the end of the day.
Right, yeah, exactly. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
So.
Speaking about other relationships, how can people that may be listening to this or finding out about it, how can they help moving forward, or if they have things to donate, how can they get a hold of you to do that?
So the best point of contact for me is my cell phone. So they can reach me at 608-290-1769. And you can text, you can call. If I'm on the phone with someone else, please leave a message, because I will get back to you. That's what kind of, when you think about the amount of items that we have collected and we've not even made an official call.
Mm-hmm.
What's going to happen when that happens? I mean, there is just, it's all the way from the top of that smokestack, which we were so lucky to get, that whole ring from the top, to Norm's lunchbox.
That's right.
I love that story.
I know, me too.
And Nick's dad's shirt, and, you know, I thought I got some really cool pictures of your dad, Steve, during the times that he was helping down there too.
Yeah,
and some good pictures of you together, and that's
yeah. Thanks for that.
You know,
thanks for that. I appreciate that.
I'm an orphan, so those are I get how those things mean a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't work there.
Me neither.
My father didn't work there like your dad did in any official capacity. But what I did find out later was that my dad actually did work in the plant at different times because, as I said earlier, it was a cement contractor. And what I forgot about was that he had the first concrete pump in southern Wisconsin, and they had used it to do work down at the plant, as well as him doing some work down there. So there was more of a connection than I realized. And when we, when we're talking about the things that drive us, and we know you guys have a direct family connection, as well as Nick having done a couple of summers down there. My husband worked there, my father-in-law, and then my husband's great uncle, which we didn't know until I started doing this project and happened to find an article on the World's Fair in 1933 and 34, and there was an article for the people in Janesville that worked at the plant that had chosen when the plant was shut. They had a couple options to go to St. Louis or go to the World's Fair, the Century of Progress. And in the list was my husband's great uncle. And that's something we learned as a family. Didn't even realize that that was a third generation of our family that was down there. And that is one of the most rewarding parts of this, is that a lot of times people don't think they're connected as much as they are. And once I had some conversations with them, I write some information down, and then I start to research. And I've got, Ancestry.com, that account, and then the newspaper archive. And I'm able sometimes to give them information they didn't know. And that's very rewarding.
Yeah. Well,
watch people see their own family legacy open up and things that they didn't realize. Well,
Donna, thank you for the time tonight. This won't be the last time we talk to you about this, because I know there's definitely stuff in the future, and we'll get to that at a later date. But thank you for talking about the relationships. I guess all for one and one for all.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, it doesn't seem like that's enough. Just tell me when you need me to go back to work and give me that direction.
We're here.
We're ready for that, and I'm sure a lot of those people listening that have helped and maybe are interested in helping are ready to go. And we're here, and thank you so much for everything you've done and continue to do. And I know that there's challenges with it, and like in anything, but pat yourself on the back, because it's truly remarkable that you are still going strong at this, where most people, I think, would have turned and walked away with a lot of these challenges from, you think you got a building and then you don't, and then COVID hits and there's issues, and it's just, yet you're still passionate, you're still determined, and you've got an army of support behind you, so we're here for you whenever you need help.
Yeah, so thanks, Donna.
And thank you guys, because I wouldn't be able to keep, trudging on if I didn't have my crew.
We are the crew.
Okay. Right?
Maybe me a little bit more than Steve.
Yeah, that's okay.
He likes to
Yeah.
take.
I'm
He
a
takes
little-
breaks.
I'm a
He takes
little older.
breaks.
I'm a little
He
older.
takes more breaks.
That's fine. All right. Well, thanks, Donna.
Thanks, Donna.
We appreciate
Thank
it.
you guys.
All right.
Have a great night.
Appreciate you guys.
Jamble.
Hey, all right, everybody. Thanks for listening to the episode, the interview with Dona Dutcher, the curator, director of the Legacy Center. Great time tonight, Nick.
That was a powerful episode and much needed.
It was. So, a lot more to come on this in future episodes. We'll get back to kind of some of the nuts and bolts, but for now, it's time to enjoy the weekend. So, with that, shall we call it a night?
I think it's time.
All right.
Jamble on, Steve.
Jamble on, Nick.
Jamble on, Janesville.